What's up YouTube, it's your boy Nash here, welcome back to the channel, and welcome to another episode of WWE's Biggest Issue. In this week's episode, this is going to be a very interesting one, but a very controversial one as well. And this one is all about how this year's WrestleMania should be booked. And if you look at the WrestleMania card now, what we have as of now, we have 4 matches on the card as of now, all championships. We have Roman Reigns versus Edge for the Universal Championship. We have Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship. And then, of course, The New Day against AJ Styles and Omos for the Raw Tag Team Championship. And what's interesting about this is where it's going to be located. It's going to be located at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. And it was supposed to have taken place there last year, but due to the pandemic, which we are still under, technically speaking, it took place inside the Performance Center, and there was no people inside of it. So this was actually the first time in WrestleMania history that we had no fans at WrestleMania. But when you think about the different bookings for some of the matches at WrestleMania, you also have to think about the very first WrestleMania ever. WrestleMania 1, March 31st, 1985 in Madison Square Garden. There was an attendance record of 19,121. And it's interesting because the match card was kind of stacked, actually. It was actually kind of stacked. There was like 9-10 matches on the card. We had how many title matches? 1, 2, 3. We had 3 championship matches on the card. First up, in this order, we had Tito Santana versus the Executioner, which obviously Santana defeated the Executioner via a submission. And then, of course, King Kong Bundy versus Special Delivery Jones, which ended in 25 seconds. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Matt Bourne. And then, of course, we had Brutus the Barber Beefcake versus David Sammartino, Bruno's son, which that ended in a double DQ. We had the Junkyard Dog versus Greg the Hammer Valentine, but that ended in a countout. We had the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov versus the U.S. Express, which was Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. And that was for the WWE Tag Team Championship. Then, of course, we had Andre the Giant versus Big John Studd, which was a body slam match, which featured Andre the Giant's 15-plus year career versus a bag that had $15,000 in it. And back in those days, 15 grand, that was a lot of money. That was a lot of money back then. We all know. And then, of course, too, we had Wendy Richter versus Leilani Kai for the Women's Championship, and then Hulk Hogan, the WWE Champion, teamed up with Mr. T versus Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Rowdy Roddy Piper, with Pat Patterson and Muhammad Ali as the special guest referees. That card alone, it was booked. And truth be told, I actually saw it because I have the entire WrestleMania anthology on DVD. And of course, I've mentioned this before, but my mom had gotten me the complete box set, which also had WrestleMania 21 right inside the lid. I would have been able to have had WrestleMania 21, but it is what it is. I was able to watch it on the WWE Network, so I'm okay. I'm cool with it. But after watching that pay-per-view, this card was booked in the right direction, because when you think about it, just to give you guys an idea, Wendy Richter was screwed out of the women's championship by the Fabulous Moolah, and Wendy Richter was able to regain the championship in such a short amount of time. And it's interesting because the women's championship is such, has so much prestige in WWE that, again, women like the Fabulous Moolah, women like Leilani Kai and Wendy Richter and and Mae Young, just to name a few, they were the ones that paved the way for the future generation. Meaning women like who can I name? Bull Nakano, Bertha Faye, Alundra Blaze, Trish, Lita, Beth Phoenix, and now to women like Sasha Banks and Bayley and Bianca Belair. This was a pretty stacked card, I have to admit. But you also have to think about some of the other WrestleMania events that took place. Like WrestleMania 2 took place amongst 3 locations: the Nassau Coliseum in downtown New York. You had the Allstate Arena in Chicago, and then of course the LA Memorial Sports Arena, which I believe is still available. Actually, it's still around. I'm kind of surprised. I'm kind of surprised that it's still there, but it was in downtown Los Angeles, and the final matches for each venue, It was Mr. T versus Roddy Piper in a boxing match. It was the first time that we had that happen. Greg the Hammer Valentine and Bruce the Barber Beefcake versus the British Bulldogs for the WWE Tag Team titles. And then, of course, Hogan and Bundy in a steel cage for the WWE Championship. And then, of course, too, you had WrestleMania 3 inside the Pontiac Silverdome, which is no longer around. It's no longer around because of the fact that the roof, every time it would snow or it would rain, it would, the roof would disintegrate, and it literally took them more than $5 billion just to resurface the roof. That venue, that event had 93,173, and for that point, going into WrestleMania 32 in Dallas, that was the first time that it had that event like that was huge, had that many people. And then of course WrestleMania 4 and 5 both held in Trump Plaza, or I guess the historic Atlantic City Convention Hall. Which I guess was now named the Jim Whelan Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City. Both venues had a little over 18,000 fans, and of course WrestleMania 6. This was the first time that it took place outside of the U.S., inside Toronto Skydome, now known as the Rogers Center. Going forward, a lot of these different WrestleMania cards were booked either in the right direction or in the wrong direction, and when you think about cards being booked in the wrong direction, you have to look at WrestleMania 20 in New York City, in Madison Square Garden, where it all begins again. It took place March 14th, 2004, with 20,000 fans. That was the record. That was literally 20,000 even. 20,000 even was the was the attendance record. And what's interesting about this one had mostly title matches. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 championships were defended. And the card was as follows: John Cena versus Big Show for the United States Championship. Booker T and RVD versus the Dudleys, which was Bubba Ray and Devon. Garrison Cade and Mark Jindrak and La Resistance. Rene Dupree and Rob Conway. And it's funny because Garrison Cade had not just that name, but also was a part of Raw and changed his name to Lance Cade as well. So it was kind of interesting. And then, of course, you had Captain Charisma, Christian, who's now out doing his own thing. I think he's with some other company. I don't remember. And against Chris Jericho, who is also with the same company as well. And then, of course, you had Evolution, Batista, Randy Orton, who was the Intercontinental Champion at the time, and the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, versus The Rock and Sock Connection, which was The Rock and Mick Foley. And then, of course, you had Tori Wilson and Sable versus Miss Jackie and Stacy Keibler. And it was in a Playboy evening gown match. I don't even know. It was kind of an interesting. Gimmicky match, but it didn't. It was kind of a weird one, I will say. And then, of course, we had the Cruiserweight Open. And it was interesting because this matchup was two superstars would start in the ring. A victory could be attained by pinfall, submission, countout, or DQ. Once that superstar has been pinned or submitted or whatever, he leaves the ring, and another superstar from the ringside area enters. This process goes on until there's only one man left, and that man would become the Cruiserweight Champion. It featured the champion at the time, Chavo Guerrero, against Akio, who was not only known as Akio, but also was known as Jimmy Wang Yang. If you guys remember him from back in the day, yeah. Billy Kidman, Funaki, Jamie Noble, Nunzio from the FBI, the Full-Blooded Italians, Rey Mysterio, Shannon Moore, Tajiri, and of all people, Ultimo Dragon, one of the most prolific performers in Lucha Libre, hands down. And then, of course, Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar with Austin as the guest referee. Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty versus the APA, the Basham Brothers, and the World's Greatest Tag Team, which was Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin for the WWE Tag Team titles, or I guess the SmackDown Tag titles, so to speak. Then, of course, Victoria versus Molly Holly. Hair versus title, which means if Molly Holly lost the match, she would have her head shaved. And Molly Holly lost, and she had her head shaved. Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship. And then, of course, Kane versus the return of The Undertaker with Paul Bearer. And then, of course, Triple H and Shawn Michaels versus Chris Benoit for the World Heavyweight Championship, which that was like the longest match of the whole card. That lasted over almost 25 minutes. That was booked so weirdly because both Brock Lesnar and Goldberg were going to be leaving WWE at that time. And it's interesting because that was the night, because that card was stacked in the wrong direction. Because don't get me wrong, John Cena becoming United States Champion, Rikishi and Scotty retaining their titles, Benoit winning the world title, Eddie Guerrero winning the WWE title, that was great and all, but one of the big key factors was that matchup between Goldberg and Brock Lesnar. That matchup had no synergy with the fans, and that was one of the worst. That was one of the worst matches ever, hands down. And then of course moving on into the new decade, 2010 to 2020. Obviously you have WrestleMania 26 at the University of Phoenix Stadium, which is now changed to the State Farm Stadium, actually, which is kind of an interesting one. The Georgia Dome, in Atlanta, Sun Life Stadium, which has been changed to the Hard Rock Stadium, which is kind of weird. MetLife Stadium, the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, Levi Stadium, the AT&T Stadium. This was once known as the Citrus Bowl. Now it's known as the Camping World Stadium. Back to the Superdome, back to MetLife Stadium. So when you think about it, when you think about it, a lot of these different matches, cards were booked in very weirdly at some point, and one of the most notable ones was WrestleMania 35 a couple of years ago, and the card was stupid stacked. It was as stacked as it can be, and it was just... How many matches were there on the card? There was literally there were 16 matches on the card, and you had Tony Nese versus Murphy for the Cruiserweight Championship. You had the women's battle. You had the WrestleMania Women's Battle Royal. You had Hawkins and Ryder versus the Revival for the Raw for the Raw Tag Titles. You had the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, Seth Rollins versus Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship, AJ Styles versus Randy Orton, the Usos versus Aleister Black and Ricochet, Rusev and Shinsuke Nakamura, and of course the bar being Sheamus and Cesaro for the SmackDown Tag Titles, Shane McMahon versus The Miz in a Falls Count Anywhere match, the Iconics versus the Boston Hug Connection, which was Bayley and Sasha, Nia Jax and Tamina, and of course the Divas of Doom, as they called themselves, Beth Phoenix and Natalya for the women's tag titles. You had Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship. Samoa Joe versus Rey Mysterio for the United States Championship. That only lasted a minute, just a minute. Literally, it says here lasted a minute. You had Roman Reigns versus Drew McIntyre, Triple H versus Batista in a no-holds-barred match, which if Triple H lost, he would have been forced to retire from in-ring competition. And of course, Baron Corbin versus Kurt Angle in Angle's last match ever in WWE. The Demon Finn Balor, yes, Demon Balor versus Bobby Lashley for the Intercontinental title, which was the second to last match of the card. That right there is just history on its own. And then of course, Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair for the Raw and SmackDown Women's titles. And this was a pretty... I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a stacked card, but literally half of these matches did not go so well for for the fans, because the fans couldn't even see the matches because of the lighting. That was like one of the worst things possible. And if you guys don't remember the Cruiserweight Championship tournament, the first round featured Tony Nese versus Kalisto, Drew Gulak versus the Brian Kendrick, Humberto Carrillo versus Oni Lorcan from NXT, Cedric Alexander versus Akira Tozawa, and that was the first round. The second round featured Tony Nese versus Drew Gulak, and then of course Oni Lorcan versus Cedric Alexander, and then the finals featured Tony Nese versus Cedric Alexander, and Nese ended up winning that tournament. So, if I was to predict how this year's card should be booked, I feel like they need to have. I think what they need to do is continue the rivalries that they're doing now, rather than just make up new ones. Because if you guys remember, over the last several years, all WWE has done was create different, was ended old rivalries and started new ones when those old rivalries should have lasted going into WrestleMania. Like they did back in the day. Like they did in with, like, say, WrestleMania 23, for example, which took place in Ford Field in Detroit, and the card was stupid stacked. It was stupid stacked, and I believe there were 9 matches on the card. This one was a pretty incredible card. I mean, we had how many title matches? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 title matches on the card, and it was a pretty stacked card. I mean, you had Carlito and Ric Flair versus Chavo Guerrero and Shane Helms in a lumberjack match. You had the Money in the Bank ladder match. Khali versus Kane. Benoit versus MVP for the United States title. You had The Undertaker versus Batista. You had the ECW Originals versus the New Breed in an 8-man tag. Bobby Lashley versus Umaga. Hair versus Hair, battle of the billionaires. And then, of course, Melina versus Ashley, who sadly passed away a little while ago, actually. So God rest her soul. For the women's championship, and then, of course, John Cena versus Shawn Michaels for the WWE Championship. That matchup and the Battle of the Billionaires, the World Heavyweight Championship, and the United States Championship, and the Money in the Bank ladder match booked so perfectly. That was booked so perfectly. It's no wonder why the reception that they got was absolutely insane. It was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Literally just positive reviews. But yeah, I think what they need to do is continue the rivalries that they have now. Like, now, bring them going, have those rivalries go into WrestleMania, and then maybe the rivalries can end there, and they will be able to get a fresh start from that night going into next year's WrestleMania, which will be in which will be inside AT&T Stadium in Dallas. But those are just my thoughts anyway. Again, I feel like if they were to book it like that, that would be going in the right direction, and there would be. And there could very well be more paying fans coming in to watch WrestleMania, because from what I understand, I believe there's going to be, from what I understand, from what I understand, from the rumors I heard, there's going to be well over 45,000 people attending Raymond James Stadium, and I believe after this WrestleMania, from what I understand, they're actually going to start touring again after WrestleMania. So right around like I would say right around mid-May ish, so around there. I would say around there, because if they were if they were to start touring now, it would just make things even worse for the pandemic, because obviously the cases have gone down extensively. The death toll, I think, is like mid is like mid range, so to speak, but yeah, I feel like that they need to, I feel like they should start touring in mid-May, or rather, I guess, in mid-June. That way, once everybody has gotten their shot, there you go, But again, those are just my thoughts on how WrestleMania 37 should be booked. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts on it, and again, a question of the day from last night: what are you guys' thoughts on WrestleMania? Being back in business, and what match are you looking forward to the most? Let me know in the comments below. Again, if they were to book it book it where the rivalries continue on into WrestleMania, it would be a perfect WrestleMania across both nights. But who knows? Anything can happen. But guys, that will do it for this week's episode of WWE's Biggest Issue. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash the thumbs up button if you guys are new to the channel and you guys want more episodes of WWE's Biggest Issue, which gets posted every Monday. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you guys do not miss out on any new content that comes your way. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. All the links will be down in the description below. If you guys have any fan mail that you want to send me and want me to open up on the channel, my address will also be in the description as well. And on that, this is your boy Nash, signing out.